you ready to create the extraordinary and meaningful life you want? I'm Terry Yoffe, and I have 8 decades of living on this planet. And one thing I learned, you don't wait for the next best thing to come your way. You get out there, challenge yourself, find your courage, and step into what you want. As a coach, I guide and help others step into who they are, armed with my years of wisdom, life, and business experiences. Every podcast episode will inspire you to confront your limiting stories, take bold steps, and create the extraordinary life you deserve.
The number one reason why most people don't get what they want is because they don't take time to think about what it is that they actually want.
Meet Brandon Gaydorus, founder of Warm Heart Life, and someone with many talents who helps others create change and transformation. Today is such a great day for me. I have the pleasure of being with and talking to Brandon Gaydorus. This past weekend, Brandon hosted his last A to B Con, and it was an amazing event. It was my first one, and I just can't say enough about the people he attracted and Brandon himself. He is such a human being that even his title, Warm Heart Life. So I am going to introduce Brandon the way that he introduced every guest that came up on the stage on Saturday. And we welcome, drumroll, Brandon Gaydorus.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it's funny. My mentor said, he said, Brandon, if I could go back years and years into my teachings, specifically with public speaking, he said, there's one thing I wish I taught more of, and that's when you go on stage, you're an entertainer. He said, I see so many people in the business world, they go on stage thinking that it's something they're supposed to do for their business. He said, when you're on stage, your job is to entertain people. And his teachings really rubbed off on me on an early age on how important it was to not only make people laugh, but make people have fun. And so when I started doing comedy, I started doing that to help my public speaking better, not to necessarily do a Netflix special. And all of a sudden, I start posting some of my comedy clips. And then I got to have cool opportunities like last year when a lady was like, hey, can you MC my event in Las Vegas? So I have a lot of fun MCing events nowadays. So I appreciate that intro.
And you know what it reminds me of as you were talking? From the show Gypsy, where she sings, Let Me Entertain You. Isn't life a lot about what you just said?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like if you're not having fun, then what point is there to live this life? And I remember my grandfather saying, he's like, the moment I stop learning, that's the moment I hit the hay. And I feel like when you're having fun, when you're learning, when you feel like you're growing, no matter what phase you're in life, I feel like there's a lot of opportunities that are going to come your way. And sometimes I feel like we close the door to opportunities. So I've tried to keep that door open, especially with things like this, like with getting on your podcast. This is an opportunity to have a great conversation with an incredible podcast host. So I'm excited to see where we go today with this.
What comes up for me is, and I don't know who said it, isn't life a stage and everyone you meet are the actors in your life? And I think that was Shakespeare. A metaphor for your weekend and being on stage and people talking is taking that small arena and taking that into life's a stage as the bigger arena and really performing in an authentic, genuine way. And just like your audience was so appreciative of those that got up and had really inspirational words of wisdom to talk about, What would it be like if we could take that metaphor and take it out into the world every single day?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. And I really do like that metaphor because when I look at someone who's on stage, when I look at someone who's an actor that's got millions and millions of people watching their films, what do they do so well? They sell people on wanting to watch them. And I hear nowadays, I hear so many people talking about selling from stage, selling from stage, selling from stage. And I'm not the biggest fan of selling from stage because I feel like if you can sell people on your message, then they're going to want to keep listening to you and they're going to want to keep having conversations with you after you get off stage. And so when I look at an actor, I look at someone who's selling that person on 90 minutes of their time of full attention. Like I was watching Grease the other day, one of the most famous movies ever. And I'm like, you know what? I want to see what they did so well to get people talking about this movie almost 50 years later. And I'm watching the movie, I'm watching like the different scenes from when they're doing sing-alongs on top of cars, all of a sudden the car's fixed. Yeah, when she's singing, Sandy's singing outside of her house, because she's starting to think about the love affair. And it was just very interesting how they not only capture attention but get people flooding all over them when they release the movie and stuff like that. And I feel like when you're spreading a message to someone, you're selling them on listening to you. And a lot of people don't understand how important it is to focus on making sure that you're dressed the way that commands attention, you're groomed the way that commands attention, your tone is in a way that commands attention. You understand how to implement jokes. You understand how to have the proper pace. Most people don't have the proper pace with speaking, and it makes it harder to listen. And then from a social media aspect, the visual as well. 90% of social media supposedly is not listened to. So that's why captions became such a big thing on social media. So I like that perspective right there.
Thank you. So, Brandon, we've had this great beginning. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are. Warm Heart Life is so synonymous with you and how I've gotten to know you and who you are as just a human being in this world.
I mean, I think that's a great question. I think that's something I ask a lot of people too, because I'm so curious what life was like growing up. And, growing up for me, my father was, it was a little bit different of a visual than I think most people had growing up. My father switched careers when he was in his mid 30s. He dropped everything and went back to school. So he would drop me off at daycare. These are like some of my first memories as a kid. He would drop me off at daycare and then he would go to school to get his master's degree because he wanted to go into finance. And so when I was younger, my mom had just had the third kid, my brother Matt. And so now she has three kids running around and she's also kind of funding the family while my dad's going back to school. So it was a little bit different than I think you see with most families. But what I saw with my parents was they were committed to making it work no matter what. And so while a lot of people's parents maybe would go out on Friday nights, I would go down to the basement and my dad would be in there. He would be studying for his exam all the way through my high school years because he was always trying to get that next certification. He was always trying to get that next thing to get ahead. And we didn't have a lot of babysitters growing up. My parents just always seemed to like, okay, we're going to pick you up. We're going to pick you up. I saw a lot of commitment growing up. And I feel like that has definitely contributed towards the commitment that I've had with my career and just following through with promises on relationships. But what I didn't see a lot of growing up was the social life. And so when I got to college, I had one goal. I said, I want to figure out what it's like to make a lot of friends. It's not like I didn't have friends in high school, but I was not very sociable. I didn't really understand the art of developing friendships. And so when I got to college, I had that goal. And what ended up happening was I started meeting a lot of people. I started making a lot of friends and experiencing new towns when I would do internships every summer. And then when I was 20 years old, this guy came to our class. It was a mandatory seminar. And he said, hey, my goal when I was younger was to be the best in the world at what I did. And all I did was write down the top 10 people who were the best at that. And then I focused on learning, observing, shadowing, studying, and meeting those 10 people. And not only did he become one of the best, but that inspired me to put together my top 10 list. And so I was into golf fitness at the time, and I saw that as an opportunity to be able to apply something that could help me get better. And 3 weeks in, I get on the phone call with the number 3 guy on my list. He gives me about a 15-minute call. He told me everything I needed to do to be successful in that field. And 6 years later, at 26 years old, I got voted top 50 in America by Golf Digest as a golf fitness trainer. And I was on the same list as that guy who gave me the advice 6 years prior. And so what that did was it set a spark into what was possible in life. And so I thought that was everything that I wanted to achieve. But unfortunately, I wasn't fulfilled. Like I felt lonely. I felt like the last 9, 10 years that I committed towards learning all this stuff, connecting with people, traveling the country, trying to learn, work for these masters. I felt like it was just very lonely. And I was just like, man, if this is what it feels like after all that, I don't know if this is what I want to do for the rest of my career. And it wasn't like I hated it. I really enjoyed it. And there's a reason why I was considered one of the best, but I wasn't fulfilled. And so because of what I went through there, I understood what it was like to take away limiting beliefs and to just try something and the growth that you can have along the way. So I said, if I were to take away all limiting beliefs, what would I want to do? And I said, you know what? That mountain over there, I want to climb it with a massive group of people. And I had no idea what that looked like. I just knew I wanted to climb it together. And I started with creating core values based on the top 10 rules. So I studied the most successful businesses that I thought: Amazon, Pandora Jewelers, Starbucks, Walmart. And I studied their core values. And I said, if I can have core values that align with the most successful companies in the world, then I got a chance of building something special. And so for the first year of Warm Heart Life, I would just say the core values almost every day. And then eventually that turned into my first personal development book, The Care Principle, Creating a Life That Makes a Difference to the World.
And here we are, The Care Principle. And I went through the book and I love C, create opportunities, A, active lifestyle, respect is earned. I love that. Respect is earned. And excelling forward, which I love those principles.
Those are the core values, and it's like, I think about those when I created those core values. I had the 4 core that spell the word care and create opportunities for yourself and others. It's like you saw a perfect example of that this weekend. Not only was that an opportunity for me, but everyone in the audience had an opportunity to learn, grow, and connect with other people. And so that's a core value that was instilled. And that's why at other like I've gone to other conferences that barely have any networking. And, I couldn't have an event if we didn't have that, because it's a core value that's instilled in my mind. And then active lifestyle, it's not what most people think of. It's not just staying active on your health. It's staying active on being a good person. It's staying active on your goals. It's staying active on your commitments. It's staying active on becoming a better leader. And then respect is earned, not just given. It's one of those things. It's like, you had a great time at my conference this weekend, but if all of a sudden I don't show up for this podcast today, are you really going to have as much respect for me as you had before I didn't show up? Probably not. So it's kind of one of those things. Every day, I feel like we have to earn respect. We could be a great person yesterday, but if we're a grumpy person the next day, I could use other words too. If we're that type of person the next day, how much is that person going to appreciate us? And then excel forward. I had no idea A to B Con was going to be a conference that kind of changed everything for me when I put that core value together. I just knew that the fastest way to get to point B, to get what you want, was to learn from the people who had that. So I wanted to make that an important core value of Warm Heart Life because I really believe in mentorship. And the first real thing I had with Warm Heart Life was a mentorship internship program where I mentored high school and college students in a 5 to 8 week program. And through that, I helped them get connected with like-minded people, people that they were interested in meeting. And I had a young girl in college. She got connected with one of the higher ups at Vogue magazine because she looked up to Vogue. I had a high schooler. He interviewed the CFO of Costco. Why? Because he reached out. And that was the big thing that I encouraged them to do because I knew if you could learn from the greats that you would learn how to accelerate.
Stay tuned. Brandon has a lot more to share. And now a short word from our sponsor, Try Coaching. Are you getting caught up in the noise and chaos of what is happening around us? And are you finding it harder to move forward with positivity while not giving up your power? My superpower is helping people like you see where you are giving up your power. Please reach out and let's start a conversation so that you can begin to call the shots in your own life. Having an open heart and going through life like that. I have no idea how you came up with the name, but I'm just going on my own thought process. It personifies not only how you live, but what we can all do to go through life being open and warm without judgments, because we all have that voice that's always judging. Having an open heart, which is very difficult, that makes someone vulnerable. And who wants that? How did you come up with the name?
I was at a conference in St. Louis and it was more of a fun one. Like there was some stuff on stage and then there was just a lot of fun activities from workouts to just kind of live music and hanging out. And this guy gets up on stage and he said, these companies pay me hundreds of thousands of dollars to help them out. And I say the same thing every time. You just got to care about your people a little bit more. And so that really stuck with me. I was like, this guy has, I think, over $1 billion in revenue with his company now. I said, if this guy has built that off that word, let me explore what that means a little bit. And when I was sitting at the beach one day trying to figure out where I wanted to go next, I just said, what does everybody need? And I was like, everybody needs a warm heart. And everybody needs a shoulder to lean on when things don't go too well. Everybody needs an ear that can listen when someone just want to talk something out. Everybody needs that person who takes initiative to help them out with something that they're really struggling with. And I was just like, man, everybody needs this. So that was part of the inspiration. And then I saw this movie when I was a kid called Pay It Forward. And for those of you who don't know what Pay It Forward is, it was a movie that came out in 2000, so about 25 years ago. And there was this teacher who put something on the chalkboard for this 7th grade classroom. And he said, think of an idea that can change the world and put it into action. That's your year-long extra credit assignment. And this kid, Trevor McKinney, took this very seriously. He's like, okay, what can I do? And he started noticing that there was people who needed a favor. They needed a kind gesture. And one of them was a homeless guy. And so he fed the homeless guy food. Another one was his mother, as she was struggled with alcohol. So he took everything out of the cabinet and chucked it in, threw it away, emptied it out. So his goal was to help 3 people. And if he could help those 3 people, he didn't want anything in return except for them to help 3 more people. And he said, if I could utilize people to make a change, then it's possible. And so I rewatched that movie in my adult life kind of around this time period. And that's when it really clicked how powerful a warm heart is. And so I said, if we can get more warm hearts or more plus ones then we will be able to make change with this world over time. If we're constantly getting people in our life like that, this, not everybody in the news, but a lot of the news is negative stuff. And so, like school shootings, for an example, if the news focused more on highlighting people who are doing great in school or cool stories in school, I think there would be a lot more community, a lot more camaraderie, and a lot less depression where that type of stuff wouldn't even be on people's minds. And I could be wrong with that. That's just a thought. I do think that depression would seriously lower if there was more positivity in this world. So that's how I kind of started the process of Warm Heart. And that book, The Care Principle, really allowed me to think about a lot of the mentorship that I had had in life, a lot of the books I read, and it helped me understand how to put something together that could give me a sense of accountability. So I think of a lot of the stuff written in that book. Like that book, it's not like it's a bestseller. In fact, I hear a lot of people put out books nowadays that they say it's a bestseller, and I can guarantee you my fitness books have probably sold a lot more than whatever their bestsellers are. I can also guarantee you that that book, The Care Principle, has barely ever sold. And that has been one of the most valuable books that I could ever ask for in my life, because it's given me an accountability system for myself to help figure out where I can go with the rest of my, not only career, but with the rest of my life.
So I want to point out for our listeners, I feel so connected to Warm Heart Life because I am wearing a top that absolutely aligns with the color in his checkerboard of Warm Heart Life. I just realized that.
There you go.
Brandon, with all of this that you do, how do you feel? And you mentioned it, but I'd like to highlight it, creating change. What does that mean for you? How do you see it now? And how do you look forward to creating more change? Because as you said, we need change. As a coach, that's my passion, helping people create change.
Yeah, I think it's amazing what you're doing and how you help people create that change with their business and in their life. And it's just one of those things where when I had success in my first career, I realized that I could relate to an actor. I could relate to a singer. I could relate to a musician. I could relate to a business person, because what I did was I constantly was going out of my comfort zone to figure out how to get really good at something. And so when I got good at something, I realized that it just wasn't that much fun as the things that I had done with other people. Like, for example, in college, I had the party house with my buddies my junior year. And when we would talk about a party, and then when we would think about, okay, how are we going to market it? And then when all the people would show up, they would be smiling, they would be happy. We would have so much to talk about after that. And so I always found it a lot more fun. Like I won a dodgeball tournament in college. It was so fun when we got to celebrate and win that. And so I always had a lot more fun with people. So I looked at change with other people as a lot better way to expand in the future. And so what ended up happening was I said, you know what? Let's figure out a way where we can start doing things together. And the speaker schools have really been probably the most fulfilling thing that I've ever did in my life. I hosted a conference in 2021 and I wasn't really sure what to do after that, but my mentor said, you're ready to start teaching a speaker school. And so I called the best speaker I knew in the area. I said, do you want to teach this? And he said, sure. So we ended up just kind of doing this on a whim, and we taught our first speaker school. And I had never really felt more fulfilled, because people who were learning from us were now spreading a message about something that I know they were going to start spreading to other people. And so all of a sudden I was like, this feels really good, knowing that you're helping other people who are now helping other people. And that aligned with the Plus One, that aligned with the Warm Heart, and that also aligned with the movie Pay It Forward. So that's kind of how I started looking at that. And it's crazy thinking now that I've taught 25 speaker schools And we've been, I think, in like 9 different cities. So yeah, that's kind of how I looked at change, was like I wanted to do it together. And I think there's a story in Think and Grow Rich called The Power of the Mastermind. And it talks about how when 2 brains come together, a magical third brain gets created that helps come up with ideas, solutions. And it's almost like a problem solving mechanism when those 2 brains come together. And I think that's why a lot of people work with you with coaching, because they know if they can combine their brain with your brain, they're going to be able to have breakthroughs that would have never happened without you.
Creating change is, in a lot of ways, paying it forward. It's aligning and being so open and even vulnerable and wanting to be so inclusive that it's like you've got your arms stretched out, kind of helping people move forward. And what could be more fulfilling than helping people create change while you're creating change, kind of paying it forward? Exactly. What do you hope your legacy would be as you think about it?
Yeah, I just hope, there's a lot of ways I can go with that question, but I think many of my inspirations have come from people who have created that legacy that's still talked about to this day, that we learn a lot about in the history books. So Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Muhammad Ali, MLK, like those people really inspired me, especially in my early 20s when I started actually taking interest in studying these people on my own. And one of the things that I felt like that they did so well is they left an impact past the time that they were alive. And I just hope people can still learn from a lot of the things that I've taught while I was alive after I move on from this earth. And ultimately, that's why I create the books. That's why I put myself on camera so much. And I will have to say, one name that wasn't mentioned there that has inspired me a lot is Jim Rohn, the personal development motivational guy, because I learned so much from that guy, from his videos. And he's not been alive since 2009. And so I hope my legacy is that people can still learn from a lot of the things that have helped me out so much and helped many others after I'm gone.
So beautiful. You have said so much today. What is one tidbit, one nugget that you can leave our audience with? So kind of condensing everything you've said.
Yeah, I feel like the number one reason why most people don't get what they want is because they don't take time to think about what it is that they actually want. And what happens is we get around people who don't want to listen to us, who will listen to a dream and then doubt that dream. And then all of a sudden we stop going after the things that we want in life. And so I think the last thing I would leave you with is take time to think about what it is that you want, and then make sure to get around people who will allow you to actually put the thoughts together of what needs to happen to pursue it. And then when you do start pursuing it, make sure that you understand challenges will be there along the way. And if you could just push through those challenges, you'll be surprised at the things that do happen in life. I face challenges every single day. I tell people who ask about entrepreneurship, they say, "What's it like?" I said, picture every single day there's something you don't know how to do, and you have to figure out how to do it, whether you want to or not.
Great, great advice. Great advice. And I'm also going to close with, would you believe that Brandon is also a comedian, a stand-up comedian, as well as everything else? Brandon, Warm Heart Life. This has been such a honor for me to really have you here and to listen to all the things you are doing in life and how you are putting yourself out there. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your warm heart life story. And we care, because you certainly do care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry.
We just heard Brandon's compelling and extraordinary conversation that has offered you thoughts on how to create a warm heart life. If you loved what you heard, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review. Please visit my website, trycoaching.com. Are you an introvert who suffers from social anxiety? You won't want to miss my next episode with Brian Galke, the decoding detective, as he lets us in on his journey from introvert to mastering communication skills and techniques for decoding facial features.